If dwarf planet astrology is your jam, or even if it's just kind of getting your interest, well, we're going to be talking about Mucky, one of the main dwarf planets, as well as aromatherapy to help tune in with this planet and also how to use its power in your life as well. Joining me today is Liz. How are you today, Liz?
Well, I'm a little worried that they might bring the men in white coats about this one because I've done nothing but meditate and get huge amounts of information, which will either make me a genius or somebody that should be locked up. So we'll see how we go.
Well, this is a really interesting thing. If we think about the fact that most of these dwarf planets weren't even found, many weren't even allocated. There were some that were just allocated names in September, since it all happened after 2000. So we are within the first 25 years of working this out. And when we look at astrology, they've known for eons about Mercury and Venus, and they even discovered Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Soon after, like when we got telescopes. So the work that we're all doing now, the conversations we're having, the conversations other astrologers are having, it's pioneering, and we're kind of laying down the route. So I think at this point we are shooting arrows in the dark, but we hope to shed a little bit of light on what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about Makemake. Really interesting. What I love about the dwarf planet, and I think I've expressed it in previous conversations we've had, is that they're being allocated names from other traditions around the world. We're not sticking with the good old Greek and the good old Roman. And what Liz loves about that is that I decide that I want to choose oils from the indigenous countries where the god is named as well and throw random oils at it. So I've got some fun ones for you today, Liz. Um, but Makemake is a god. Let me give the quick synopsis. A creation deity from the people of Rapa Nui, which is also known as Easter Island, but I prefer the name Rapa Nui, which is part of the country of Chile, although it's an island off of mainland Chile as well. Um, he's got a connection to birds, and sometimes depicted as being part bird, part man in that type of way. And that there aren't too many. It's not like the Greeks and the Romans where there's a lot of interaction stories or different things like that. Did you dive in much to the mythology aspect of it, Liz?
Obviously, that was going to be the bit that I wasn't going to be able to leave alone. So the connection with the bird is that around about August, September time, the migration of the birds had comes past, and particularly they were interested in the sooty tern, which if you've never seen it, it's like a beautiful gull which has like very black sleek wings and this really long beak, very elegant like an egret. And when the sooty tern came around, it was said that it brought back the fertility of the land. And so the Rapa Nui had a, a big competition, a really important competition that was used to determine the chief who would hold the different clans together the next year. So the island had many different tribes, and the kings of each tribe would go to the priests and priestesses who would go into caves and they would chant with the help of children, which I liked, chant and dance and wait for the messages to come from the god Makemake. And he would tell them, these are the people that I want to compete for the title of king. So what would happen was each tribe would designate a proxy to go and hunt for the first egg of the sooty tern. And that proxy would try and win on behalf of the clan, and then the chief of each of the winning clan would become king over them all because he was seen to be the manifestation of the god Makemake. And so this egg that they had to get was extraordinarily magical, but also thanks to the birds, in really difficult places. So it was believed that the god Makemake would speak to the sooty tern, and he would tell them, come to the island of Rapa Nui and pop your egg here. And you would think, well, that's okay because you know where it is. Well, there are these three tiny little islands who they're called the Motu Islands, and that is Ka'o, which is called Sharp Island, which is like a razor blade of rock that comes up from the water. Iti, which is small island, and Nui, which is large island, and they sit in the water in shark infested waters, full of fish, incidentally, which is why the sooty terns, of course, are very interested in it. The confluence of water brings all of the food, and then there's like a feeding frenzy. So you can imagine the sharks are there, the terns are there, and also the proxy from each tribe is there. So all of the people would gather together on this like precipice, on the side of what's called Rano Keo, which is a vertical cliff, 300 meters, absolutely vertical when you look at the pictures. So the proxy would have to climb down 300 meters, swim across very cold shark infested waters, climb up onto the right rock where the sooty tern has put it, gather the first egg, can only be the first egg of the sooty tern, tie it to his forehead, and then go back down off the rock, down into the shark infested waters, up the 300-meter rock again, and it would be the first one back with the first egg. So the thing was that the ritual, you would imagine, would be they would start when they go, oh, I've seen the sooty terns, now we need to do the ritual. No, that's not what happened. They went, okay, it's whatever their month's called, where it's August sort of going to September based on the moons, and right, so we'll send the proxies off, and they would have to wait in the water for weeks sometimes for the birds to come to see the first bird and to climb up and then to get back. So to me, I would have thought, first of all, why are they not the kings? You know, I mean, I think I would be, what a great honour to be bestowed on you, that you would be the proxy. I'd be like, huh? but so this is an extraordinary ritual that went on to around about the 19th century, and it's recorded quite well because the anthropologists were able to go and sort of interview the last sort of remaining people who would do it. So it was believed then that the birds were the connection between the spirit world and the living, but also that they brought messages between the living and the gods, and that the proxy very kindly bestowed the quality of king on the chief, and then he became the living incarnation of Makemake for the year until some other sucker took his place. So that is why he is the Birdman.
Wow. Well, I was thinking I was having a bit of a rough day today because the cord that charges my iPhone was playing up and I was getting annoyed at that. And I'm thinking, in comparison to what the proxies had to do, I can deal with a dodgy charging cord for sure.
Was it a red cord?
No, it was not. It was
Oh,
just
that's
a
your
black one.
problem. That's your problem. So the sacred colour of Makemake, the chieftain would then wear great long red threads, and he would be the manifestation of Makemake. So Makemake is trying to come through, you see, and you're using the wrong cord.
Obviously, there we go. I'll have to go down to the office shop and get myself a red cord or some paint. Anyway, so let's unpack a bit of the astrology of Makemake. Now, with any planet, asteroid, or dwarf planet, there's three types of things we can kind of consider here. First of all, we can look at where it plays out in your birth chart. Secondly, we can look at when it moves around and kind of has different what's the word I'm looking for? Angles or relationships with other planets, things that tend to happen then. And also, we can also look at when the planet goes retrograde each year, and each dwarf planet will go retrograde each year for about half the year, really, type of thing. When we look at the overall themes of astrology and Makemake, there are two main schools of thought that come up, and I think they both play off really well. The first one is that it's very much to do about equality and fair distribution of resources. Now, there tends to be, I think I've talked previously about these octaves. So we kind of know that Mercury is all about the mind, Uranus is more about innovation, and Makemake is more about this global transformation. It's like that next level. So, how do we make the world better for everyone? So we've already, in our little pockets of Western society, we've already found places where we can, let's make our country a little bit better and that type of thing. But we're leaving people behind. Makemake is about how do we bring everyone up in that way and make sure there's a fair distribution as well. A great analogy by the astrologer Sue Kynes was, Uranus would be responsible for creating the telephone, but Makemake would be responsible for creating the smartphone. It's that high level of electricity and innovation in that way. So when we went in to look, first of all, at this idea of I want to work with Makemake for my own, I want to understand it in my own birth chart. Where he appears in your birth chart will show where you are extremely passionate about making a difference and making sure that all is well. And this also extends beyond people. This is making sure that everything we do is, it's very, ecologically sound. And we want everyone to have the best, but we don't want to damage the environment. We don't want to hurt the animals in that type of way as well. And for me, one of the oils that really steps through for this is lemon myrtle. In our book Gifts of Essential Oils that I wrote with my good friend Vanessa Jean, we allocate each oil a gift, and the gift for lemon myrtle is mateship. Now that's a bit of an Aussie slang because we have something in Australia called the tall poppy syndrome, and it kind of originated from the fact that we're a convict nation. And our first people that came here before the original Indigenous people here, when the British sent their convicts here, most of the people didn't like authority. We don't like anyone who's better than anyone else. And so we have this whole kind of everyone must be equal. And lemon myrtle ties in really beautifully with that. It's a really great equalizer, works with the solar plexus chakra, and also has with this Lemurian energy, which as opposed to Atlantean energy, which is very much about hierarchies and priests and priestesses and who is the most powerful. The Lemurians, and we see this, this ancient civilization almost ripple around the southern hemisphere, is more about we're not in a pyramid, we're in a circle, we're all different, but we're all equal. And so I think lemon myrtle and helping us to find that equality in our life and have a look at it in your birth chart, do some searching, chat GPT may be able to, help you decipher it, or better still, keep an astrologer in work and get them to talk you through it a little bit more. But working with lemon myrtle is really great for going, how do I make this world equal and fair for everyone and everything? Does that make sense?
It does really make sense. I think that what's interesting though is how that does tie in with the myth, because there is a hierarchy. Well, actually, it's not even a myth, it's a ritual. So there is a hierarchy with Makemake, but it's not born into. Like in Britain, we have a monarchy, and people are born into the urge of the monarchy, and they have to rise to their status. Really, they're judged on what they do, but they're born into that role. But these are equal people, really, and actually. The chief was no better than anybody else. He didn't get the egg. really quite annoyed about that whole thing, but still. But yes, and I have to say, I found doing this work really hard thinking about this. So let's start with why, first of all. So you talk about the octaves and how I'm going to say Uranus, and now everybody laughs at me, but I'm going to say it because I'm never going to be able to say. So Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, and then Makemake is the higher octave of Uranus, right? So actually medical astrology would say Mercury rules the nervous system and, as you say, the mind. We would say that medical astrology rules the receptors of the nervous system for Uranus, and, as you say, innovation. So what are the high octaves of those? And so, we can think about it quite abstractly. We can think, well, what even do we mean by octaves? So if we were to say, right, Mercury is middle C, so oh, a dear, a female dear. That's middle C. Actually, the throat chakra is higher than that, would be A, but still that it serves a purpose. So we go from that and then we go, right, okay, so what is 2 octaves up from that? And I only know of one piece of music that everybody would know that has a note 2 octaves above that. And
Is it
that
the
is
Taylor
in
Swift
both.
song?
No,
Is it a Taylor?
no.
It's not a Taylor Swift song. Oh,
No,
not everyone's gonna know
try
it.
again. You can do it. Say, what was the highest note you can think of?
Oh, I have no idea, but we're not talking about Mariah Carey, and it better not be All I Want for Christmas Is You.
No, it's not. Bohemian Rhapsody. Let's have some class, right? So, Bohemian Rhapsody. It's not even Freddie's note, right? It's Roger Taylor does "Devil Set Aside for Me, for Me, for Me," right up there, right? That is 2 octaves higher. So that's almost out of the perception of human range, right? That's dog whistles. So if we're going 2 octaves higher than the nervous system, then that can't be human. It just can't be, because it goes outside. So it must be more than human or extra human or non-human. So what I'm thinking of is it's probably perception. So innovation, perception. So what you pick up in your etheric bodies, and that idea of how one hears things that nobody else can see, or that we know are there, right? So, for example, what colour's a raven? Do you know?
Black would be my guess, but I believe I might be
Black
wrong.
to black to humans, but apparently it's really brightly coloured to birds, right?
Wow.
I know, right? And did you know that trees scream?
No.
They do. If they're hurt, they let out a really, really high pitched sound to speak to the birds and to speak to the other plants. And you obviously knew that the trees speak to each other through fungus. So these things are happening, but in our human, like, normal perception, we do not see them. And the way that Makemake is in the egg, and the person who's the proxy has to kind of sense when those birds are coming. To me, this has always been the answer to how do we solve the ecological crisis. There's no doubt, global warming, all of those things. The imbalance is that we know that there is an imbalance, but money will always trump. Didn't really mean to use that pun, but it works. Trump ecological concerns. The industrial revolution keeps going, and the only way I feel that that's going to change is that people start to realize that there is other consciousnesses happening around them. And so when we look at, well, what did the world need in the 2000s that these new consciousnesses came to play? We needed that. We needed that people would be able to see that there was an extra perception out there. So to me, I would say, if you were looking at it from a medical astrology point of view, the only kind of label I can put on it is the etheric bodies, how we sense through the etheric bodies. And I think rather than it being innovation, I think it would be like the idea of like convergence fields. So when I was, so I couldn't work it out at all. I couldn't even come up with anything interesting to say. So I went and meditated with the bees, and the bees did what they can often do of just laughing at me, which is what they quite often do. And they say, "Why are you talking to us? You need to talk to Athena." And I was like, "Okay." that does make sense. That's not quite as rude as I was expecting you to be. So we taught in bee medicine how to do a particular medicine that takes you to our equivalent of the Akashic records, and you go into the invisible library, and Athena is always there, going around like birds. And so I'd said to her, "What am I supposed to do with this? I have no idea." And she said, "Well, you need to think about rosemary, verbenone, and eugenol." And I was like, "Thanks for that." I felt a bit like the man that had been put as the proxy. Thanks for that. So that right, she said, "Well, go and look what verbenone is." Well, so to be clear, I have never used rosemary verbenone because, as people know who watch this often, I really hate rosemary. And there's only one thing I hate more than that, and that's what's being told what to do. And people will often say to me, if you use rosemary verbenone, you would like rosemary. And I'm like, "Oh, do you think I'm going to spend money to be proven wrong?" I don't think so. So I've never even touched it. But so I don't know the answer. But I said, right, okay, so, well, what's special about verbenone? So I thought I'll look it up. Why does the plant make verbenone? Well, the plant doesn't make verbenone. So herein lies a tale, right? So on wood, and particularly not so much. Well, let's look at a bigger plant than a rosemary tree, because I've got big rosemary trees, but I've got much bigger fir trees. So verbenone is a resultant of alpha-pinene. And I'm like, "Oh, but I love alpha-pinene. We're into my zone now." So what happens is little beetles get onto the tree and they go, "Oh, we like alpha-pinene too. We're going to eat all the alpha-pinene, and it's in the bark, so we're going to chew the bark." And what happens then is they're very kindly regurgitated. And if that's disgusting to you, that's what bees do to make honey. So this is what they do. They regurgitate it. So the wood comes covered in beetle puke, which is nice, which is verbenone, believe it or not. So if ever you wanted a reason to wash your herbs before you cook, this is it. And so what happens then is the more verbenone there is on a plant, that means the more it's been attacked by a beetle. And while the plant doesn't make the verbenone, it uses it as a signal to the birds to say, "Come and sort this shit out. I'm covered in beetles. Come and eat the beetles." So we have this like exactly what I'd envisaged. They were showing me like interspecies. Apparently it's called biocemon. No, I can't even say it. But a conversation between species, that the plants react to the beetles and tell the birds, "We need you to come here and sort this out." So what about eugenol? Well, I couldn't find anything like that about eugenol. But if you think about what eugenol is, it is the best defense we have against bacteria and viruses, because it is continually reacting to its environment and evolving. So where the doctor keeps making a very clever antibiotic, the bacteria go, "No, no, 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 we've done another one." Well, nature has found an extremely intelligent molecule in eugenol that goes, "No, no, 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 we're still coming to get you." And so you have this like continuing development between the plants and the bacteria. So to me, that seems like, I can't talk about specific essential oils because I think it's much more subtle than that. I think it's parts of the plants that are speaking.
But I guess with that consciousness and that awareness of the plants and the species talking to each other, at the moment humans talk to each other, but we don't talk to any other species. That is that kind of next level of consciousness. And, if people knew that every time you chop down a tree, it's screaming, that brings a bit more compassion and wakes up a bit of empathy and could be really interesting, which I guess kind of comes in with that mucky energy for sure. I do want to clarify one thing. The rosemary verbenone that you're talking about, now, is that a constituent, a chemotype, or a species of rosemary, or is it just something that rosemary plants produce? You lost me on that bit.
So the oil rosemary, CT verbenone, is a type of it's rosemary that grows in a particular place or has been created by a particular circumstance, probably beetles actually, that it just throws up more verbenone. So when the oil has been assessed and they look at the GCMS, they go, oh wow, look how much verbenone this is. So and a particular like chemotype does that. Yeah.
And with that, what differentiates that rosemary from I know saying regular rosemary is not probably the best thing, but is there something that makes verbenone chemotype better?
Yeah, so it's much softer, I am told. Presumably because it changes from the alpha pinene, this might be something to do with it. But you know how like when you smell rosemary, it's got quite a sharp camphoraceous scent. It doesn't have that camphoraceous scent. It's much softer, and so it tends to be recommended for children and things like that. It's a much gentler version of rosemary. But like I say, I can't speak to that because my ego has gone no, but now I might have to because I'm quite interested to see. Yeah.
Likewise. No, but I think that carries through holistically to it's an oil that would obviously help us to, I talk about rosemary being really good for remembrance, not only for mental remembrance, but also spiritual remembrance, like why am I here? And this chemotype could be really good for, well, why am I here and what is everyone else here for and how do we all work together? So I think that's a perfect alignment with the Makemake energy as well.
Sorry to interrupt for just a moment. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Sixth Sense. Now, you're probably getting rather excited about essential oils, and you might be tempted to go out and just grab some. But did you know the essential oil world is not regulated, and a lot of what it says on the label is not governed by anyone? A fun fact, which is not so fun, is that 75% of all oils that are sold as pure, natural, or organic lavender are not even from a plant. So how do you know what's real? Well, I went looking for that question a long time ago, and I found doTERRA to be a really reliable source of high-quality essential oils. They don't just test their oils themselves, but at the end of the process, they have an independent third party verify and double-check their oils to make sure that you are getting what nature intended purely from the plant. They also source where nature intended the plants to grow as well. If you want to grab hold of some essential oils from doTERRA, then I offer a discount code, and this is available no matter where you are in the world. Now, I don't want everyone to get essential oils. I want everyone to use essential oils. So when you become one of my customers, you get access to me and my VIP education platforms, ongoing discounts, ongoing freebies, live classes in all time zones all around the world, and so much more. So if you're interested in getting some essential oils that you know are really from nature, and this is important not only physically, but metaphysically as well, please reach out in the links below.
Now, one thing I find really interesting that often comes up when Makemake goes into retrograde each year is because Makemake has a bit of an element of, fertility and, you being abundant in your life. But Makemake will often show up often if we've all tried it once, we've tried to sneakily get away with something that will work in our favor for a little while, and then we get caught. Like, okay, so who's stealing the pens from the stationery cupboard? That kind of thing. And what happens is Makemake retrograde will tend to bring up these situations to go, the reason you're not getting what you want, the reason you're not manifesting why you want is because you're doing it for selfish reasons rather than greater reasons. And if you can make that switch and go, how can I do something that's going to help everyone and everything, then you're going to be a lot more successful. And funnily enough, this ties in really beautifully with something I've discovered about cumin essential oil. Cumin is whenever you're doing manifestation work of any type, we'd often go for, citrus oils for manifestation. And I like lavender as well, and bergamot mint can be good as well. But pop a drop of cumin in. Because cumin is kind of like that clause that you want to put in every spiritual contract but may it be for the greatest good of all concerned. And cumin kind of helps to equalize that and has been used magically in the past for that as well. And I think that ties in beautifully with Makemake and this idea of when we're working with Makemake and looking at where we want to bring improvement and change and innovation in our lives, and where it may express itself in our birth chart, or it may play out as it kind of journey through our birth chart to where it is now, that we want to make sure that we're doing everything for the greatest good of all concerned. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it really speaks to that being a higher octave of Uranus, because that's something that it took me a long time to get my head round, because when you're thinking about Uranus energy, the myth is about, or the archetype of Uranus is about the individual and the collective. And I was like, okay, so how is that a thing? So the only way that I could kind of work it out in my head was like, somebody joins a club and they say, right, we need somebody to join the committee to help us to do this. And because they've joined this club and they're like, oh my gosh, this club is so great, I really feel like I fit in, it brings everything through for me, I really want to help to do this, yeah, I'm going to join the committee. So they join the committee, and probably for about 6 months they're like throwing everything into it. But after 6 months, it becomes very aware that, well, out of the 6 people on the committee, there's only 2 people are actually working. The other people are going, that won't work. We've tried it that way, because that's how committees work, right? We'll have a meeting about a meeting. So then the person goes, oh my goodness me, I cannot bear this anymore. I can do this better myself. I'm going to go and set up my own choir, for example. And off they go. And so the choir has evolved into something different. And then probably some of the people who were in the old choir goes, oh my God, cannot believe something better. At last, we've been dealing with this for so long. And they gravitate to the new thing. So you always have like this almost like 3-tier structure of those people, the old school, the ones who want to make a difference with the old school, and then those that have broken away to do something new. So you always have that idea with Uranus. And so this idea of pushing everybody forward but also being equal, I like that a lot. I think that is exactly the higher manifestation of Uranus, but I don't know how that would work in essential oils at all. But I think that cumin definitely does have that feeling of very smooth, kind of bit of a spiciness, that something's cooking under the surface, but it doesn't have that sharp edge. And so that idea that everybody feels kind of chill with this, there's not too much rocking the boat. I like that a lot.
Now, the third oil that I kind of discovered, I've set myself a challenge with all these dwarf planets, because they're from different localities around the world. When we look at aromatherapy and the main essential oils, it is a bit kind of Euro or Western centric. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, so if Rapa Nui is part of Chile, I couldn't find any essential oils that are native to Rapa Nui, but could I find something that was native to the country of Chile? And I did find one. It's called White Chilean Myrtle, or Ariane. And if you want to check it out, there's a really nice essential oil company by the name of Moena, Moena, and they grow a lot of things within the Amazon sustainably, and their story is quite beautiful. And I just happened to buy some of it years ago out of curiosity. It smells a bit like our common myrtle that you'd find in the Mediterranean, and someone's maybe spilled a little bit of mint in it. But I thought this is a really beautiful essential oil for that kind of innovative aspect. And when we look at the movements of Makemake in relation to birth charts, in relation to the other planets in our solar system, when Makemake gets somewhere, it shakes it up. And if my memory serves me right, in the birth charts of people like Martin Luther King Jr., Barack Obama, I think Nelson Mandela, and even some of I think even when we look at some of the worst people in World War II and even 9/11, there's something prominent in their chart that either in their birth chart or the moment it happened that kind of was. There's no wonder there was a shake-up, because it is like these kind of ideas, and it's kind of quite perfectly timed where Liz was saying, you're either going to think that I'm a genius or a madman. And a lot of the time, Make's energy is very much that. I'm going to come up with an idea that's not just a great new idea. It's like, what on earth are they thinking? It's like before their time, in that type of way. This essential oil, when you smell it, is such a uplifting, cleansing, innovative kind of oil. I think energetically, it's really talking about that innovative kind of madman, crazy idea, and can help spur that in ourselves. And when Makemake is prominent in our chart, either our birth chart or where it is, at certain periods of time, then I'd be working with white Chilean myrtle or Ariane.
I love it. And now I want you to tell me, what's the maximum dilution of white Chilean myrtle and the Latin name, since you just dumped that on my desk.
That, I was too busy being a madman to get you any of that kind of detail, so you're going to have to tell us about it.
All genius, no structure. I will answer that question in a moment. So, my final oil. So I actually did spend some time on ChatGPT with this, because I was like, I agree with what you say, that quite often they don't understand dwarf planets. What they're very good at doing is being able to kind of map correspondences and say that maps that and that equals that. So I said, right, I want you to help me to understand this, and it said where it falls in your chart can also show what you deem to be sacred and how the sacred comes up in your life. I thought what was really interesting was, like, when I did the map, came up that it was in my 6th house, which is Virgo, and they'd said, you live your life as if everything's sacred. And I was like, that's so funny, because kind of I do. Like, I'm always like, no, we don't do that. That's got to be kept for special. So I thought, right, okay, so what kind of oil could we think about in terms of sacredness? Well, we could go frankincense, of course, the most sacred. You could go myrrh. But I thought, no, actually, I kind of want to talk to this idea of the plants talking again. So I kind of spent some time thinking about it, and I thought, right, jasmonic acid. So jasmonic acids are how the trees send information between themselves to say, I've been hurt, something's coming, right? So it might be that there's a beetle turned up and nipped them, and they send a letter to a tree six trees down and goes, make sure you switch on your nasty phenols because this beetle needs sorting out, right? So do that with jasmonic acid. So it's like, well, is that in an essential oil? I know the answer to that. It definitely is, but what is it in? And actually loads. So lavender, basil, rosemary, they've all got it, because of course they've all got this signaling that says, beetles, we don't like beetles, switch on. So I thought, right, well, okay, we've looked at rosemary. That's an extremely good mental one. We're going Mercury, Uranus, Makemake. We've got to be always on that sort of route of thinking. But the other oil that I really like for anything to do with thinking would be basil. But in this case, I think we're going to go holy basil, because not only does it have that, it has loads and loads of eugenol. So we've got the two sort of ideas of that, and she is an embodiment of a goddess. You know, she too is the embodiment of the goddess Lakshmi, so divinity on earth. And so yeah, holy basil, I think. And what's interesting is none of the oils that we've picked, I don't think, are pretty. Have you noticed that? They've all got quite a sharp, camphoraceous side to them. So when we were thinking about Haumea, it was all about the heady notes, the ylang-ylang, the gardenias, all of that. But both of us, without talking to each other, have come up with the same kind of fragrances, ones that are sharp, herbaceous, and ones that really signal to the brain. I think it's really interesting. So holy basil would be my last choice.
I love it. And yeah, you're exactly right. And we didn't correspond with each other, apart from kind of going, these are the oils that I'm going to be talking about in a couple of days, type of thing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
So talk to us. You've come up with a blend. You're famous for your blends now.
Just the one blend. I could only do one because I was thinking I'm just so far off my head. And also I think that if I was doing this kind of work, and actually I'm going to say that I am going to really continue with this work because I feel like I've hit on something that's fascinating to my soul. But I think that anything that I did would be it's so dilute that it would almost not be aromatherapy anymore. It would be, so for example, this blend. Can you see it? So
Yes.
I've blended it down into a carrier oil, but this carrier oil is only to use a couple of drops in the melted wax of a candle, right? So I've put like topical dilutions here, but they're not really relevant. It's just to cover our back, really. So the three oils that I put together were white Chilean myrtle. I really liked your thoughts about this. I would say this is whispers to Makemake, as in come and talk to me and teach me about these ecological things. So 1 drop of white Chilean myrtle, 1 drop of Rosemary, sooty, verbenone, and 3 drops of holy basil. Now what's interesting is these are all really quite pungent. So like the maximum dilution, Adam, of white cypress is 1.9%. Only 1% for holy basil because it's so strong. And we can go 3 drops of rosemary, sooty, verbenone, but I would go less. I would go 1%. Even so, these are really tiny, 10 mils. And then what I would do is I would get a little tea light candle and I would light it and I would wait until I got a pool of wax, and then I'd just put 1 drop of that blend in there. So you have this such tiny diffuse vibration of these plants, and say, come on then, what do you make of that, Makemake? I'm interested for you to talk to me through that. So that's how I would use that, but that's so far off aromatherapy, it's daft.
So white Chilean myrtle, maximum dilution 1.9%. Yeah.
Yes, and Latin name Luna Checem, which I really like. So Luma, Luma, and then Chequen, Luma Checem.
We will put that down in the notes in case anyone's interested in that one, because when we're talking about brand new oils, it normally tickles some people's fancy. Did you find anything else out about white Chilean myrtle out of curiosity? I found little bits about it's kind of a respiratory benefits and calming to the respiratory system, that type of thing, but not a lot. Did you find anything?
I didn't look. I was hoping you would know what you were talking about, Adam.
I kind of found it. I found it through a bit of my process of searching online. It kind of I was like, what are oils that come from Chile? Found it, realized I'd bought a bottle ages ago, and it just kind of sits there. And I opened it.
You do have it.
I do have it.
But I mean, it is a myrtle, isn't it? Because the other Latin name is Myrtus Chequen, so presumably it is a proper myrtle. So I would say that it would be respiratory. Does that what it smells like?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's what I found, kind of thing. So yeah, it's I was so enamored of like the coincidence that I'd actually found it, that had been sitting there, and then I've just been playing with the energy of it, and it's kind of like that. Yeah, deep breath in, that consciousness, that awareness, and the things we've been alluding to, that awareness beyond just like, oh, what do I think everyone needs? It's what do I feel everyone. That could be part of it,
right? And I was thinking about that myself, because I was thinking, right, well, when we're thinking about quantum physics and quantum energy and quantum aromatherapy, imagine like you've got an atom. And with it around the nucleus, you've got electrons, protons, whatever, in their own shell. So an electron is stuck to its own shell, its own field, because it has that energetic resistance. So quantum physics says, and bear in mind, this is really dumbed down for me, that if you give it some energy, whether that would be like heat or light, and it's exactly the right resonance, then that will move the atom, and the atom changes and can actually disappear. because it changes state, and so it's no longer there, and then it comes back in a different form. So that's how quantum computers work, for example. And as you were saying, if you think about, right, if Uranus is the telephone, then Makemake would be the smartphone. In this case, we could say if this is a computer, then this would be the quantum computer. Well, if this is aromatherapy, this is quantum aromatherapy. And the only thing that changes the state of that electron to make it actually do the quantum leap is it has to be the exact same resonance. In other words, the same frequency, the same feeling. So a bit like the quantum tunneling thing that I've talked about before, where there was the experiment with the two little fruit flies, and they were given some acetophenone to smell. So acetophenone is something that smells like almonds. And then they added something called deuterium to it, which is like hydrogen but heavier. So it was only like this tiny little bit of extra weight. And the fruit flies were like, no, we know the difference. We're not going there. We know that we're going to get an electric shock, which was the outcome of the experiment. We know that we're going to get an electric shock because we can feel that is a different thing. And they're thinking quantum aromatherapy, that is exactly it, that you can feel the difference. So it has to be not just like the chemical structure, but the understanding that, for example, that eugenol in holy basil acts differently to eugenol in clove. It's the same molecule, but they do slightly different things, works in a different way, make you feel differently. And I think that you hit the nail on the head, that it's that perception of how does it make me feel.
So we'd really invite everyone to dive into Makemake and the astrology, pull it up in your birth chart, see what that means, be aware of when Makemake goes into retrograde, and I always share about that each year as well. But I've found personally that lemon myrtle is really good for helping us just on that base level to be aware that we all need to be equal. Cumin, to be aware of when we work, we want everyone to benefit equally from it. And then when we need to be that innovative kind of think outside the box, whether you're going to be the madman or the genius, that's where the white chili and myrtle or the Ariane comes in as well. So do you want to recap your oils for us, Liz?
No, because I can't remember. So I would go rosemary, sooty, verbenone, holy basil, and then I'm going to say like the contradiction between the eugenol. I'm not going to use clove. I'm going to say allspice because I think allspice feels really different to holy basil. But yeah, this idea that they can move and change with the environment.
So Liz and I took a bit of a risk and a bit of a punt doing something totally different, looking at dwarf planets and astrology in this new series of looking at essential oils and spiritual use. You know, we want to let you know that we've got one more to go, and then we've got a whole range of other things. We want to talk about love, we want to talk about energetic protection, and a whole range of things as well. But we'd love to know. There are a lot more dwarf planets out there, and I'd love to drag Liz through the mud maybe sometime next year for another set of 5. Are you up for it? Or are you not up for it? Let us know in the comments. Or do you want to go back to more traditional spirituality stuff like full moons and that kind of thing as well? We hope that you've gained something about Makemake. And of course, when we look in astrology, the main reason we want to look in astrology is it allows us to find out more about ourselves and know ourselves better. So we hope that we've been able to facilitate that today, and that the essential oils we've introduced might be keys to open those doors. Until next time, when we dive into our last dwarf planet of this set, where will we go? I'm feeling a little bit chilly. Not chilly, chilly. I'm feeling cold. There's your hint. We'll see you next week. Take care and blessed be.
Bye-bye.
I'm Elizabeth Ashley, UK Director for the National Association of Holistic Aromatherapy and founder of the Aromatic Mystery School, where essential oils meet the deeper, more mystical side of healing. Here you'll explore the spiritual, emotional and energetic dimensions of plants and learn how to weave them into your own rituals and well-being practices. If you're ready to work in a way that nourishes both your soul and your senses, join us at the Aromatic Mystery School. The link's right below.